Champaign County Agriculture Today with your host, Dennis Riggs.
Welcome again to Champaign County Agriculture Today. I'm Dennis Riggs, your host for the next 30 minutes as we talk about agriculture and the things that affect us here in Champaign County. You know, agriculture is an industry that affects many of us, possibly a job, possibly a work style or a job that you have or a family member has, but more importantly, we all eat 3 times a day, maybe a little bit more than that, some of us, but it's a very important industry for not only the residents here of Champaign County, but also worldwide. The Champaign County farmer and the Illinois farmer has been known for providing food and fiber throughout the world for over 112 people or so, and that number keeps rising up. Today, we have on our panel 3 gentlemen who are going to talk about the environment and conservation, the areas of agriculture. Maybe we don't think about that often. We think about raising corn and soybeans here in East Central Illinois, wheat, oats, and some livestock. But we're going to talk with our panelists today and find out what they know about conservation and our environment. I'm going to start out with Steve Stierwalt. Steve is the chairman of the Champaign County Soil and Water Conservation District. Steve, thanks for joining us. Tell us about the Soil and Water Conservation District. What is it? What does it do here in the county?
Thank you, Dennis. The Soil and Water Conservation District is just exactly what it sounds like. You know, in this case, we are a volunteer board that helps to direct the efforts of a lot of different agencies to help with soil and water conservation issues. We're interested in taking soil erosion. We're interested in water quality issues, water quantity issues. A lot of the conservation that goes on in the area, you know, we hope to be involved with, and we work with our partners who will be basically introduced later that provide technical assistance to the projects that we help identify.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Good to have you with us today. Now, our next panelist today is Brett Roberts. Brett is the state conservation agronomist from the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, sometimes called NRCS. But we want to find out, what does that NRCS stand for? What does that agency do, Brett?
Well, we are a technical agency within the United States Department of Agriculture, and we have an office almost in every county of the U.S., and our primary role is to work with landowners and land users on a voluntary basis to solve natural resource related problems. We work through our local soil and water districts that helps their local people, and so we allow them to define what are the priority natural resource issues, and then we basically we apply science to correct those problems.
Most of the people that work in that agency, are they farmers? Are they engineers? What's the background of a lot of people in your agency?
Well, we employ people with a wide variety of backgrounds. Many of us, or most of us, do have an agricultural background, but it's not absolutely essential, but we have an assembly of agronomists such as myself, which are crops and soils type specialists, but we also have hydrologists and engineers and biologists and foresters and geologists. So we look at natural resource type problem solving in a multidisciplined, faceted type way.
Very good. Well, pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you.
And on my far left there is Kevin Donahoe. Kevin is the district conservationist with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. District conservationist, where's your district and what do you conserve, Kevin?
Well, basically every district, a district conservationist, their job is basically to get conservation on the land within the boundaries of the district. Well, what is the district? In most cases, it's one county. There are a number of field offices throughout the nation, though, that have multi-county responsibilities, but in our case, I have the responsibility for Champaign County only.
Has the National Resources Conservation Service always been the name of the agency, or how long has it been around? Is it just a new thing?
Well, basically, about a year or so ago, we had our 70th anniversary. We originally started out as a result of severe erosion that was happening in the 30s, and that got the attention of Congress, and basically the Soil Erosion Service was created whose name later was changed to the Soil Conservation Service, and that name then changed to the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which we call it today.
Sounds like we're all working together for the same goal, however, and that's to protect the soil and water resources here on our planet. Is that right? Well, we're going to take a little bit different stance today. A lot of times we just talk within the panel, but we thought we'd try something different. That is to go out on the street and ask some people what their questions were about agriculture. So what we did is we went over here to the U of I Quad, and we asked some people about the environment and conservation, and some questions that we might ask the panel. So let's roll that segment and see what some questions are of the people out there on the street.
What do farmers do to protect water?
I've heard that farmers dump unnecessary chemicals on the fields. Is this true?
I was wondering how come when farmers plant their crops, sometimes the corn stalks are still up and sometimes they're not.
Well, those were some excellent questions and things I'm sure our panelists are going to want to address, so let's get started. I see the first one. Do farmers do anything to protect the water? Steve, you're a farmer. Are you doing anything out there to protect the water here in East Central Illinois?
Well, water is one of our most precious resources, as a farmer, we can't do anything without the water that we need for our crops, and so we are always conscious of trying to protect the water, and some of the best ways to do that is to keep the soil in its place. Keep it on the land. Don't allow it to get into the water, into our surface water. And so what we try to do, a lot of what we try to do is to through no-till, strip tillage, nutrient management plans. There's a lot of different things that we'll probably talk about more in this segment that farmers are doing to protect that natural resource of water.
One thing that I've noticed as I drive around East Central Illinois, you can kind of tell when a construction project is about to begin. Now, this isn't farming, but it is conserving the soil. You'll see this little black fence going up around where a construction project's about to happen. Brett, let me ask you, what is that fence? What on earth is that? Is that a boundary for the lawyers to look at, or what is that out there?
Well, basically, that's what we call a silt fence, and those border areas that are going to be disturbed due to construction activities. And during construction, soils are greatly disturbed, and when we get hard rainstorms, that's going to take, and that causes soil to be suspended in runoff, and then you wind up getting that soil on our streets and in our sewers, which goes directly into our streams, and so in essence becoming a pollutant. So those silt fences are sort of barriers to keep that silt from leaving that site.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, is there a lot of difference between what a construction manager, a construction project has to do as they're building a new subdivision or a new industrial area compared to what a farmer does with the soil in their year-to-year growing practices?
Well, there are many differences. A couple of the more obvious ones, though, would be the amount of activity that happens in a real confined area. A construction site is obviously a very busy site. Many things are happening there, and because of all the activity that happens on that site, you get a number of things happening. Soil disturbance. You also get compaction in the same area, so the water that falls as rain on that site won't have as much of a chance to soak into the ground because the ground is being compacted simply because of all the equipment that's driving around on the site. The other thing that you don't have typically on a construction site is good drainage. There is no way for water to leave the site other than surface runoff, so anything that we can do to contain the runoff and minimize deposition elsewhere is what we need to do.
Brett, let's talk about homeowners in a subdivision. Maybe they've got a new home or maybe an existing home. Are there things that homeowners can do to help conserve soil and water in their small area?
Absolutely. One of the things that homeowners can do, for one, is, especially new homeowners, is to get their lawn grasses established as quickly as possible. And probably the best way to do that is to make sure that they're planting adaptable type grasses so that they're going to be suitable to the sites that they're growing in, and therefore would be more rapidly established and get good root systems in that soil to hold it in place. The other thing is to choose adaptable species so that you don't require as much fertilizer and water to maintain a high quality lawn.
Steve, The second question that our people on the street were asking is that they've heard the farmers are dumping unnecessary chemicals out there on their fields. Is that true? Is that a wise thing to do?
Well, no, Dennis, that's not true. Farmers obviously, you know, are interested in taking care of the soil through conservation and like that. But it also goes back to economics. You know, any input that you use on your soil, be it pesticides or fertilizer, you know, you're very interested in using the correct amount to take care of whatever issue there might be. And most pesticides that are applied nowadays, a farmer is licensed for those applications. There's a licensing that we do every 2 years to handle pesticides. So farmers are trained in the proper use of pesticides and how to use them and when to use them. And as I say, we're very conscious about the economics that go with that. We won't use any more than we think is absolutely necessary.
Kevin, as you've seen farmers throughout East Central Illinois grow their crops and protect their crops with crop protection chemicals, do you see them being very efficient with the use of those chemicals? What do you see district-wide?
I would say yes. I see much more efficient use, and I shouldn't say much more just recently, because there has been a trend over a long period of time actually to use fewer pesticides and only to use them where necessary. Basically, every farmer now is using some form of what we call integrated pest management, where basically they identify a problem and only identified problems or identified pests that make a certain threshold. Say if it's an insect, if they have a certain number of insects on plants, on different corn plants, that may justify use of some sort of treatment. But if they don't meet that threshold, they won't treat for that pest. So that's just one example of the decision-making process that goes into use of pesticides.
We have a slide number 7 in our portfolio here today that shows a farmer using a balance of corn and soybeans planted right next to each other in a thing called crop rotation. Tell us about that, Brett. What's the farmer doing there? What type of benefit is it as far as chemical usage? Is this a good thing to reduce that?
Absolutely. One of the benefits, or one of the needs for crop rotation is that on many levels. First of all, each crop has different nutritional requirements. So in order to maintain the soil fertility and productivity, rotating crops is a very beneficial thing. The other thing is, by growing crops, the same crop on a field year after year, you are going to inevitably build pest problems that are going to make it difficult to continue to grow that crop without spending a lot of money on control measures, and even those are not effective after several years. So by rotating crops, you avoid many pest problems, and you also maintain the fertility of the soil.
That's fantastic. Well, let's go up a little bit higher. Our slide number 9 that we'd like to put up right now. Slide 9 kind of takes a look at from the air, looking down on some fields, and there's a lot of technology, Steve, that's new in agriculture. We hear things about GPS, VRT. These are terms maybe our listening public doesn't understand. Tell us about what GPS and VRT is and how it apply to a field like we're looking at here on the slide.
Well, GPS, global positioning satellites. A lot of people now are getting a taste of this in their own home atmosphere, I guess you would say. There are the in your car, if you have a TomTom or something like that helps direct you to where you want to go. That's using these global positioning satellites that can find particular spots on the earth, I guess you would say. And as farmers, we found that we can use this technology to help us be more precise in our fertilizer application, like that. Another acronym you used was VRT, variable rate technology. So we will do very specific soil sampling on different different parts of our field, and different parts will need different applications of fertilizer. And so to keep from over applying where we may not need it, we use this global positioning satellites with this variable rate technology to where we can just apply in different parts of the field specifically what's needed and no more. So it's a wonderful technology that's helped us to be more efficient and to be better stewards of the soil.
We're going to zoom into slide number 8 now, and that's going to take a little bit closer a look at some of these fields. And Kevin, I want to ask you, this field may look kind of the same to the untrained eye. When you take a look at this, how would a farmer want to farm this field differently?
Well, this field here basically has been laid out with what we call contouring, and the reason for the application of that particular practice on this field is, of course, to control erosion and to minimize soil from leaving the farm. Also to maintain productivity of the land. I think we all realize that if we erode too much soil away, the productivity of our land is going to decrease. So anything that we can do to maintain productivity of the land for a longer period of time is exactly what we need to do. And this is just one example of basically using one practice, in this case contour farming, to help maintain productivity, reduce soil erosion, and ensure longevity of the farm.
Well, our third question that was asked by our people on the street was, how come that when farmers plant in the springtime, sometimes they see fields out there with a lot of corn stalks, and sometimes they look like bare ground. We're going to reference back to slide number 1 here in just a second. And Brett, I'm going to ask you, I've seen farmers plant in 2 different types of soil. Slide number 1 here shows us some soybeans that looks like coming up through a different setup. What happened in this slide? Did they forget to get the plow out last year, or what?
Yeah, well, they did that intentionally. Okay. Old traditional way of preparing fields to plant was that right after grain harvest, then an implement called a moldboard plow was used, and what that would do, it would bury all the previous what we call crop residue, or the fodder that's left over after harvest. And they would do that to control weeds and to prepare the soil for next year's planting. With the technology we have today, we are able to avoid all that extra tillage that the farmers used to have to do, because they used to have to go and run a tractor over that field 2 and 3 or 4 or 5 times before they got that field ready to plant. Number one, it was as energy intensive, used a lot of fuel, took a tremendous amount of time, but it also left the soil vulnerable to erosion because there was nothing protecting that soil surface anymore. It was just bare, and it was susceptible or vulnerable to the impact from raindrops. What we do today is we plant directly right into that crop residue. So that crop residue acts like a mulch. It protects that soil surface from the impact of raindrops, and also slows runoff. So the water tends to infiltrate in the soil more instead of just running directly off. So, and then later, if we get into dry periods, that we've actually saved some moisture that would have flown into the creek or the ditch, and we've actually stored that soil moisture for later on in the season, and we've had some dry seasons here lately. So those fields tend to not show drought stress as severely.
You know, one of the old things that people always talked about with farmers is no matter what the weather, they always complained. We've talked today about, you can control your tillage practices, you can control crop rotation, you control a lot of that. But one thing that we just have not been able to control is the rain and how much water we get. We're going to move ahead to slide number 10 here, because when it rains, water has to go somewhere, and it has to go down the drainage creeks that are here in East Central Illinois. We are sharing water. This water isn't ours. It's used, it's recycled, it goes up in the clouds, it comes back down again. What I want to talk about is some of the projects about wetlands and what a wetland is. Steve, tell us a little bit about that. And I know there's some projects going on here in Champaign County and East Central Illinois to protect some wetlands. Tell us about that.
Well, as you pointed out, wetlands are an important part of the hydrology, basically, of Champaign County. Wetlands are not only are beneficial for wildlife, which obviously it's a great place for migrating birds and like that to stop on there, but they also help to recharge our subsurface aquifer, which here in this part of the state we're dependent on. And we as the Soil and Water Conservation District have gotten involved with a project. It's called the St. Joe Wetlands, and where we're trying to restore an area along the river that was a natural wetland until it was drained, a long time ago. And so it's an exciting project, I think, to actually bring back some of the native plants that were originally, in this area as wetland area. And it's wetland also is a wonderful place for when soil does when we do get a rain and water surface flows across, it'll carry its soil like that, and a wetland is a great place to deposit that because it keeps it out of our water courses.
Kind of like a filter.
That's correct.
Along the streams and the ditches here in Champaign County. We've got a slide number 19 that's going to show some students working out in this wetland project out there in St. Joe. This first particular student seems to be planting some type of little plant. What's on there, Steve? What's they doing?
Well, the project, the St. Joe Wetland, as I say, we were trying to reestablish some of those, some of the original wetland plants, and it quite frankly was a huge task. I think we had 7,700 individual plants, if you can imagine, like your annuals, flowers that you would get and try to plant in your garden. Well, there were 7,700 of those different plants to be reestablished in this wetland, and the high school there at St. Joseph, Illinois, is very interested in the educational possibilities, I guess you'd say, that's going to come along with this reestablished wetland. And they had students who volunteered their time to help helping to get it reestablished, and some of the pictures there shows the planting.
The land that this was done on, was this farmland originally? Was it, where did this land come from? Was it donated?
It was farmland that was purchased with a grant from the Illinois Department of Agriculture. The C-2000 program is called. And so the Soil and Water Conservation District actually has title to that land, with the idea of bringing it back to a wetland with the help of our partners who give us the technical assistance and help to get it done.
Another project going on here in Champaign County, or in central Illinois, is a prairie restoration project. And I know this is one, Kevin, you've worked on quite a bit, and it's one that's just located south of town. As a matter of fact, I'm going to start off with slide number 16, which is a very interesting slide for our folks to look at, because you see some prairie out there, and then you'll see this big arrow that's pointing to a thing called the Assembly Hall. And of course, we all know that as a landmark. What's going on with that prairie restoration project, and why is it happening?
Well, once again, here's an example of multiple things coming together to create what I would call an ideal situation. Basically, the partnership of private landowners along with the Soil and Water Conservation District, providing assistance, and then our agency helping out with seeding recommendations and such. Basically, establishing a natural or native area. Basically, a site that would look similar to what it looked like before settlers decided to land here and stay. Certainly before the Assembly Hall was constructed, but nonetheless, where else could you see the Assembly Hall? But in native prairie, it's quite a sight to see. There's more still to be done. It'll be used as quite a site for educational purposes. And I think it'll be a great window that people can look through to see what things used to look like.
Well, Brett, is it important for us to maintain some prairie? Is it just for an educational purpose, or what other effects would prairie here in East Central Illinois have?
Well, as some people know, that much of Illinois at one time was prairie. But by restoring prairie, what we're able to do is also bring back some of the wildlife habitat that the prairie provided for multiple species of mammals and insects and birds and reptiles of all kinds. So we're adding some of that diversity back to the landscape, and actually creating some habitat that at one time used to cover large parts of the state.
That is a big project. How many acres is involved in this one? Does anybody know on the Barnhart Prairie restoration? Steve, do you know what the number is?
Barnhart Prairie is around 80 acres.
80 acres, pretty good sized project. Well, let's take a look at it's not prairie, but if we go to slide number 11, this will give us a little bit of an idea of maybe some smaller projects. And this is a filter strip along a stream here in East Central Illinois, and we've talked about the benefits of wildlife here. Steve, is this filter strip, is this something that's catching on? How many of these are in Champaign County area?
Well, very proud of the fact that 76% of our flowing or open water courses now are protected with filter strips. And as you were starting to explain, a filter strip is fairly simple in that it is a grassed area along each side of a open water course. And what we found that natural grass, that natural filter, acts just as the name implies. It will filter as the water is flowing through that. If we have a heavy rain event that may pick up soil, that grass is a wonderful way of filtering out that soil and depositing it not in the water but keeping it on the land.
You know, Steve, it sounds like from all this work that's going on that one of the main jobs of the farmer is to conserve soil and water. I thought it was just to grow corn and soybeans. Is a farmer really a true conservation expert?
Well, we like to think that farmers are some of the first conservationists, and it is a personal goal of mine and other people I know to leave the soil leave the land in better condition than when we first started, because it's a resource that is going to have to be used as long as long as people are around. And so we are stewards of it for a very short time when you think of it in geologic time. And so it's very important for us to take specific care of it so that it can be a resource for the future.
Kevin, what is the goal of a governmental agency like National Resources Conservation Service? What is their goal for the future?
Well, basically, the Natural Resources Conservation Service goal has not changed since its inception. I think that is to maintain all natural resources, and it fits very much in line with what Steve just said, and that is to maintain natural resources, but also to, if at all possible, improve them, and in the process, if we can make other people aware of this whole process and the importance of it, and the fact that we all can contribute in some way as far as being stewards of the land, we should do that.
It's a big project, but one that we all take very importantly, and that's why programs like this are hopefully of benefit to the folks that are watching today. We all learn a little bit. Farmers continually are learning how to be better stewards of their soil by using both conservation practices and technology. So that's why it's important that you keep listening, and we appreciate your time as you've listened to Champaign County Agriculture Today, as we try to bring you some ideas and thoughts about a very important industry here in Champaign County. For all of us here at Champaign County today, this is Dennis Riggs. Thanks for listening.
Champaign County Agriculture Today is brought to you by Champaign County Farm Bureau.